Very excited about this conversation today because in the early part of my career, this question was really my favorite. Until Harvard started asking, what more do you want us to know? This was my favorite question. It's now my number 2 favorite question. I still really, really love this question, but the Harvard question has eclipsed it just a tiny bit because it's even more unstructured, and I just love that. I love helping clients find their story in the wild wilderness of infinite possibilities. It's the most fun. But all right, so here we go. The big S, Stanford Graduate School of Business. Here we go. So today's a little bit different from the multiple previous Wednesday workshops that I've done. I have a very different set of goals today. Rather than educate and inform, my hope today is actually to leave you with more questions than answers, and to leave you curious about your own unique potential and greatness. The way to be successful with Stanford is to say something new, to say something that you've never said before about yourself and your life, and to actually learn about who you are in the process of answering this question. So last week, we talked about Harvard's question, which is, what more do you want us to know? What do you want us to know as we consider your candidacy? In other words, how do you want to be known? So if you think about it, inherently, this question is an extroverted question. It's about who you are on the outside. It's about how you want others to see you. How do you want to present yourself? And if you think about how the Harvard curriculum works, this makes perfect sense. Harvard is almost 100% case method, which is judged primarily by class participation, which is all about presenting yourself articulately in a group environment where at least 90 other people are paying attention. It's a very extroverted MBA experience. So it makes perfect sense that they're asking you to present yourself in an extroverted way and show them how it is that you want to be known on the outside. Well, it's maybe a little bit hard to tell when you first start researching schools, but Harvard and Stanford could not be more different from each other. So understandably, even though their questions are both big and sweeping and asking you to address the heart of the matter of who you are, they are coming at it from a completely different angle. This question is about who you are on the inside. This isn't about how do you want to be known or how do you want to present yourself. The question they're asking you is, who are you really? And that might be different from how you want to be known on the outside. In fact, nearly all of our clients have completely different essays for Harvard and Stanford. That's not necessarily the most popular approach, but it's the one that we really believe in because these questions are asking fundamentally different things. Again, this question, more than any, is fundamentally about who you are. It's not about what you've achieved. And it's so important to Stanford that you address who you are, that they've actually added some little baby essays into the short answers that give you the chance to talk about impact, achievements, and making a difference. There are 3 short essays that altogether amount to something like 750 words or more than 500 words altogether to showcase your impact, because they want you to have the room to do that and dedicate this question to who you really are, not what you've achieved. If they could take a values x-ray, they would. All schools would do this, but especially Stanford. If they could just look inside and see who you are and what makes you tick, they would do that and they would make their decision on that basis. But of course they can't. The only proxy they're going to have are these essay questions. So you heard me talk about how we approach storytelling with our clients. We begin with a deep process of self-reflection. We create an awesome sauce PowerPoint that summarizes your whole life story and all the aspects of your life experience with some deep insights added to the mix. Then we get into essay storyboarding. We do unlimited iterative story shaping, and finally essays that really make you proud and inspire you. This is ultimately our goal by the time we get to the end of this process. So to the 2 pieces I'm going to touch on as I guide you towards answering the Stanford question, the Stanford question is deep self-reflection and the process of shaping your story. So let me talk about self-reflection for the purposes of Stanford. It's actually a little bit different from how you might approach self-exploration for Harvard. So the question is, what matters most to you? And so let me ask you all to just answer this question. Let's just get right to it. Type your answer into the chat box. What matters most to you? Don't overthink it. Just type something. Just whatever comes to mind, put it in the chat box, as that's what matters most to you. Doing good in the world, family, having fun, love that one. Empowering South Asian women, making your parents proud, giving people access to opportunities that I didn't have, making people feel good about themselves, empowering the disability community. Really, really good, you guys. This is a cool group. You guys are values driven. Devotion. Oh, I love that. That's subtle. I'm curious to hear more about that one. You're going to tell me more about it in a minute. Helping others. Okay. Really good, you guys. These are great answers. So, a concern that a lot of people have when they first start approaching the Stanford question is, how do I make sure that my what matters most isn't trite or boring? How many of you are worried about this? You may have noticed that other people's answers they're not that far from yours, right? What you wrote in the chat box. So let me put your mind at ease regarding whether or not your answer will be trite or boring. And this is gonna solve a lot of problems for you. So here's the answer. It is. Don't worry about it. Your answer to what matters most is trite and boring. That's just a fact. So this is why. Human beings live incredibly predictable lives. We all want the same things. This is why Abraham Maslow came up with his hierarchy of needs, because you can actually sum up the meaning of a human life into this pyramid. This is all anyone ever wanted. All anyone ever wanted is represented on this pyramid. So in terms of what matters to a human being, there is nothing new under the sun. You cannot possibly say anything new in the what part of the what matters most that they haven't heard a million times before. This should put your mind at ease, because this is not how you're going to differentiate yourself. It's not in the what that you're unique. By the way, most Stanford applicants are up here, are focused somewhere on achieving their potential. In fact, most of your answers related to that. You're focused in some way on contributing, on making a difference, on supporting and helping other people. That's all about manifesting your unique potential. However, it's also the case that many Stanford applicants have spent time in other sections of the pyramid. So I've worked with people who at times, weren't sure where their next meal was going to come from. They didn't have a job. They didn't even have a roof over their heads. Or they lived in an area that was war-torn where bombs were going off every night. People who were adopted, who were foster kids, who didn't have a sense of belonging. They didn't have a community they belonged to. And then people who really struggled throughout life to build confidence and respect, whether that was through a learning disability or periods of depression or inability to achieve their goals. Most of us, even those of us who are working on fulfilling our potential, have at times struggled to fulfill more basic human needs. And if that's true for you, then that is part of your story. If it's not true for you, that's also fine. But this is not something to shy away from. You want to kind of confront very honestly what matters to you most may have evolved, may have changed over the course of your life because your circumstances have changed. So don't shy away from that. Okay, so like I said, the what matters most to you is not unique. I'm going to share with you a selection of our clients who were successful in gaining admission to Stanford and what the bottom line of their what matters most was. And you will very quickly see that there's nothing unique under the sun. But where we start to get really interesting is when we look at the why. So here's an actual piece of advice from Stanford about how to approach their application. They say, focus on the why rather than the what. And that's because at the level of what, we're all the same. At the level of why, that's where we're different. So, what I'd like you to do right now is take whatever you said mattered most to you a minute ago when you typed it in the chat box and ask yourself, why? And then type that in the chat box. It matters to me because, go ahead and complete that sentence and put your answer in the chat box. Because they're an underrepresented minority. Very good. Because life is hard and it doesn't make sense to me if we don't have fun in the process. I'm right there with you, Narelle. I see how systems of power isolate or harm many for the benefit of few. Because giving people opportunities makes me feel like there's change actually happening. It matters because my parents sacrificed my whole life to give me access to opportunities they couldn't have growing up. Because when the people around you feel good about themselves and what they're doing, the group as a whole wins. It takes a village. Really good. All right, I couldn't become a better version of myself without it. Okay, these are great answers, you guys. So notice the diversity in these responses. Notice how much more different they are from the first answers that you all gave, right? Now we're starting to really see the differences among us, and we're starting to actually get a glimpse of people's personal stories. It matters to me because who came... It matters to me because many who come from my neighborhood don't have these resources. That's just one example. Do you see how we're now starting to get a glimpse of your personality, of your background, and of your story? So if we had a lot more time, I would keep asking why. I would ask you why 5 times. And you would see that as you keep going, you keep getting more and more specific and more refined in the responses that you give. So this is an example. Sometimes people choose family. Family is a really popular answer. But if you look closer, the answer becomes because they're the people who love me, because they inspire me, because I enjoy spending time with them, because I have a sense of duty to them, because they've helped me become the person I am. And then if I ask you to look even closer and ask, why is that important to you? Why does that value matter to you? Then again, we start to see even more differentiated answers. So one person might say, because it gives me confidence to live my life boldly, or I can always be myself when I'm around them, or they taught me about unconditional love and compassion, etc. So now we're really starting to reveal your true character beneath the surface level what. This is where the magic happens in this Stanford question. So here's a selection of successful what matters most. These are from past clients. These are my rephrases. So these are not necessarily their exact words. I'm just kind of putting it in my own words. But here you go. Take a look. They're pretty much all the same, aren't they? They're pretty much all the same. There's some nuances. And in fact, their precise wordings were a bit more unique. I took away some of the unique phrasings. But at bottom, the what is pretty much the same across the board. Isn't that great to know that all of your fellow humans care about all the same things that you do? We're really all in this together. We're all on the same team. I just love this. Okay, so, we're getting into revealing character. So I want you to think about Stanford's question as essentially this. What makes you, you? What is it that makes you who you are? So that if we took these things away, you would no longer be the person that you are. This is your goal in the Stanford essay. And how you're going to arrive at this is not just through naming values, but it's also through shaping your story. So this is where our iterative and unlimited story shaping process becomes very important. We arrive at a full understanding of your values through story, through exploring and understanding your story. So here's a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald. Character is plot, and plot is character. There's a lot of sort of theory about writing. Do you start with characters or do you start with the plot? And do you allow one to shape the other or vice versa? And the answer is they're the same thing. What this means is that your values shape your experiences, which in turn forge your values. It's two sides of the same coin. So let's take a quick look at some of your values. And this is just a different cut at the same question of what matters most, but it's a very different question, okay? So the definition of values are a person's principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what's important in life. What I want you to do now is look at your intrinsic value. So your intrinsic value is your judgment about what is important and awesome about you. And there's no right or wrong here. It's just what is important and awesome to you about yourself in your own eyes. You want to look at yourself through your own eyes right now. And another way to get at this is to think about, what are you most grateful for about yourself? What do you appreciate most about yourself? Take a moment right now and quickly write down 5 intrinsic values. What are 5 qualities about yourself that you love the most and would never change? Take a moment and do that right now. Grit. Grit's a good one. Never giving up. The fact that I value family and friends, and I'm always looking for new experiences. Really great. Resilience, empathy, conscientiousness, being a trailblazer, being a go-getter, responsibility, integrity, empathy, humility, and humor. I love it. Inquisitive and a truth seeker. Being resourceful, being able to make friends with almost anyone. That's a great one. Really great. So look, there are no wrong values. The question is just, what do you love most about who you are? What are the qualities that have shaped your life into a life that you genuinely love? Okay, now that you've got your intrinsic values, or at least a couple of them, I recommend that you continue this exercise after this workshop. But after you've got a few intrinsic values, here are the next questions that you want to ask yourself. When in life have you observed those values in action? That's one question. And the second question is, when were those values challenged? When was it difficult for you to live up to those values that you hold dear? So we're not going to answer this, but thinking about these questions will lead you to your story. It will lead you to the elements of your life experience that will be the most valuable to include in this essay to reveal your values to the admissions committee in a compelling and vivid way. So it's the why. It's what matters most to you and why that is most important to address in this essay. You probably have seen what Stanford evaluates. They look for intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, and personal qualities and contributions. So this gets at your ideals and motivations, your impact, and your curiosity. If you look closely, you'll see that the flavor of these values and their descriptions is actually very, very different from Harvard's, even though they're speaking about essentially the same qualities. So here's some advice from the Stanford Admissions Committee. Do some deep self-examination so you can genuinely illustrate who you are and how you came to be the person you are. Share the insights, experiences, and lessons that shaped your perspectives, rather than focusing merely on what you've accomplished. And write from the heart. Illustrate how a person, situation, or event has influenced you. Share yourself openly and honestly. In each essay, as they say, We want to hear your genuine voice. Think carefully about your values, passions, aims, and dreams. There's really no right answer. The best one is the one that is truest for you. Here's some advice from a client who was recently admitted. I had to throw all my essay writing skills from school out the window and really make sure that the person that came through in my essay was me. I think it's easy to settle and say, well, this is the person I like to think of myself as, or this is me at my best moments. But those essay drafts I wrote wouldn't have resonated as strongly with the outcome, and more importantly, they didn't resonate with me. I knew my essay was ready when reading it filled me with gratitude for the lessons learned in life and pride in the person I've become. This is the bar. And one last piece of advice. Stanford has a much higher tolerance for emotion. So don't be afraid to get raw and vulnerable. That doesn't mean that you're writing a Shakespearean tragedy, but you can share emotions that you shield from your coworkers in the office. In fact, Stanford really values that. And more often than not, sharing emotion can be used as a powerful driver of your personal narrative. So what does it mean to be vulnerable? Oh, by the way, I went back and reviewed all of my past clients who've gotten into Stanford, and 100% of them got vulnerable in the essay. Vulnerability is not well understood, so let me say a few things about it. What is vulnerability? It's first and foremost self-honesty. It's being really honest with yourself about who you are and who you're not, about where you've succeeded and where you've failed, about where you fell short of your own expectations and preferences. Second, it's a willingness to share powerful emotion, even if it's negative. And that has to be coupled with a generous view of one's own struggles while still portraying them honestly. So you want to be really honest about the challenges that you faced in life and how you felt about them. What you don't want to do is judge them, defend them, or feel sorry for yourself in the course of writing the essay. That's where the generous view comes into play. You want to view yourself with the kindest possible eyes while being completely honest about where you've succeeded and failed. In the end, it is who you are that gets you in. Your job is to show your best self in the application. And of course, that's what we're here to do. We're here to ensure that your character is what determines the ultimate outcome. We're a small and dedicated team. We're almost fully booked for round one. Many of you here know us very well. And if you think that what we do will add to your life and to your MBA application process, please talk to us. You can do that at careerprotocol.com/MBA.